This was a fascinating interview because Sharon went for it, didn't she? She was not holding back about her experience.
I love her.
Yeah, no, and it really is shocking that she claims CBS were essentially trying to protect Harry and Meghan because they had broadcast the interview with Oprah. So she wasn't allowed to do her job and actually talk about the facts.
Yes, and keep in mind what Sharon Osbourne's alleged sin was. Piers came out and said, I don't believe a word Meghan Markle said. Totally 100% his right to say that. There was a very smart discussion on his show about it that morning. His view was represented. The other side was represented. He's entitled to have his opinion as a journalist who's covered her for a long, long time. And that would have been true in any other story in any other time in U.S. or British history. But Meghan Markle was irritated that she was challenged by Piers Morgan, and she called up ITV bosses and complained about him. But of course, she did it to protect other mental health victims. You know, it's never about her, really. And so they investigated. And of course, he was 100% cleared. And Piers walked from that organization when they said, you either apologize or you're done. He said, bye, and left. And all Sharon Osbourne did was tweet out, I stand with Piers Morgan. He has a right to express his opinion. It's essentially what she said.
Yeah.
That's what created the firestorm against her, saying she's a racist. She didn't endorse everything he said. She basically said, I agree with him, meaning I agree he's allowed to say what he wants to say. And for that, she was pilloried. And by the way, even totally agreeing with Piers Morgan's position that Meghan Markle lied during that interview is fine too, and doesn't make one a racist. So the ladies of the talk completely ganged up on Sharon Osbourne the next day and took her out. She was one of the only original co-hosts of the show. She'd been there 11 years. She was very good friends with her chief antagonist that morning, Cheryl Underwood.
And who she had defended in the past.
Completely blindsided. Yes,
yeah, no.
It turned out she had revealed in our interview, Cheryl had been forced to get anger management classes after she had allegedly verbally abused 3 employees there. And the producers, according to Sharon, came to Sharon and said, what should we do? She'd let her go. And Sharon said, absolutely not. You cannot. Boy, was the favor not returned when Sharon's neck was on the chopping block.
Well, that's one of the things I found most fascinating about the interview, Megyn. How TV stars now will say one thing behind the scenes and another thing when they're on camera. And I don't know about you, Megyn, but all the time I have very high-profile British television presenters, household names, who will message me privately saying, by the way, Dan, I completely agree with what you said about X, but I could never say it on my show. And that's so worrying, isn't it?
That actually is one of the reasons why GBNews is so important where you guys are, because it's important for people sitting at home, and whether they're with you or against you, but to hear these views being espoused, to be reminded it's okay to not agree with what you see on the BBC. It's okay. And probably half the country agrees with you, right? They're just too afraid to say it, or they're worried about losing their job, what have you. So to that point, there was an extraordinary moment where we talked about another co-host. I'd never watched the talk, so I didn't know a lot of these women, but this other co-host name is Elaine Welteroth, and she is also a woman of color. And on the set, she was plunging the knife into Sharon and turning it, and really was kind of going after her. Well, Sharon has a tape, or somebody has a tape that was released to the press of Elaine coming into Sharon's dressing room right after the show and saying, I don't believe any of that. You don't understand. There's pressure on me and on Cheryl as Black women to sort of hold this mantle up and say, like, this is racist and that's racist. And she says, I don't really care about this nonsense, but I felt like I had to do it. And Sharon's like, why couldn't you have just said you're not a racist? She said, I'm sorry. You know what Sharon revealed to me in the interview? So as soon as Elaine left her dressing room, Sharon said she went to HR to complain about Sharon being a racist.
I know, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. And absolutely. And the one thing that I always promise my viewers is that you'll always hear the truth from me. You'll always hear what I really think of someone or a situation. And I know you, during your career, Megyn, having watched you right from the start on Fox News, you're the same. You will be authentic with your views, even if in the case of Donald Trump, for example, you're going against the orthodoxy of your organisation at the time. But we actually cannot trust the bulk of the people who we see on our television screens, on mainstream broadcast networks, to tell the truth. And that's why I think we see the rise of podcasts like yours, the rise of Joe Rogan, who, interestingly, in your interview, Sharon Osbourne said hadn't supported her, which surprised me. But it's because people just want unfiltered, unvarnished, truthful opinions. And you're simply not going to get it on a major woke broadcast network, whether it is ITV in the UK or CBS in the US.
Absolutely right. And I'll give you just a couple of recent examples here in the States. The New York Times, right, the paper of record, recently had to retract or correct a story for stating that 900,000 children had been hospitalized in the United States from COVID since the pandemic began. Actually, it was 63,000. And they ran that. They ran the 900,000 number in their paper last Wednesday. On Thursday, they had to correct it. That's just one example. Another one was MSNBC, our far left network here with Rachel Maddow and others. They ran a story about, people are taking ivermectin to fight COVID. It's a crazy dewormer for horses. And there's an ER doctor in Oklahoma saying regular patients can't even get into the ERs because they're so overwhelmed with these ivermectin overdoses. Well, somebody picked up the phone to call to find out whether this ER doctor all over MSNBC was telling the truth. The hospitals down there said that guy hasn't been working here for months. He hasn't had access to our ERs. He doesn't know anything, and we haven't had any ivermectin overdoses or patients in our ERs.
Wow.
Did Rachel Maddow take down her tweet of the story? Nope. She's, as far as I know, it's still up. She left it up. Joy Reid, same thing. They don't care even when they're caught.
No, they don't. They don't. I mean, we had the same thing here yesterday, Megyn, with Sky News, which used to be a reputable broadcaster, publishing a picture which showed Buckingham Palace being flooded, right? With 3 meters worth of water, flooding Buckingham Palace. The scientists come out and say that's impossible. Even under the worst climate change scenario, the sea level would have to rise around the world by 20 meters in order for Buckingham Palace to be flooded. Did Sky News retract it? Absolutely not. Here's the picture. And I just think it's shocking. And I think it has to be called out. And this is why people are losing trust in a lot of those old school media organizations. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed an executive order barring employers from forcing their employees to get a COVID vaccine. He said the Biden administration is now bullying many private entities into imposing COVID-19 vaccine mandates, causing workforce disruptions that threaten Texas's continued recovery from the COVID-19 disaster. The White House has accused him of playing politics.
I think it's pretty clear when you make a choice that's against all public health information and data out there, it's not based on what is in the interest of the people you are governing. It's perhaps in the interest of your own politics.
I mean, Megyn, I have to say I did a little punch in the air when I heard from the Texas governor. I thought, hallelujah, because we've got vaccine passports being introduced in Wales and in Scotland, and I just think they're so against freedom and also so unnecessary because you can pass COVID on even if you've been vaccinated.
That's right. And in fact, here in the States, there was, actually it was published in The Lancet. It was paid for by Pfizer, but there was a study showing natural immunity makes you 27 times more resistant to catching COVID than the vaccines. This is, the Lancet article actually said Pfizer vaccines are only 47% effective 6 months after you've had the second jab. So my point is simply there was an Israeli study showing natural immunity is great. And there was a Pfizer study in The Lancet showing that vaccine immunity is pretty lame after 6 months post second jab. So yeah, natural immunity is something that they should be dealing with. But on what our Texas governor did, I like Governor Abbott and I like how he sort of does things. He sees a problem and he does something about it. But I'll tell you as a lawyer, I think this is a mirage because first of all, what his executive order says is your employer cannot force you to be vaccinated. Your employer can't hold you down and stick a needle in your arm. Your employer cannot say, Dan, get the vaccine, or else. But it didn't say, you may not be fired for not getting the vaccine. You know what I mean? Like, his order was a little off in its wording, and I think that could come back to haunt him if and when it gets challenged in the courts. The other problem he's going to have, if Biden actually enacts that executive order he said he would, he won't do it. He'll do it through this agency called OSHA that mandates regulation of safety in the workplace. If OSHA ever gets around to actually enacting this alleged emergency rule, it will have supremacy. It'll have precedence over local state laws that conflict with it. That's the way our federal system works. So they haven't done it yet. So right now, Abbott's order stands and does pose a problem for companies that do business in Texas that are also subject to Biden's threat, right? So they're in a bit of a pickle. But right now, there is no federal order. Biden threatened it. It hasn't come. If and when OSHA finally hands down the order saying everybody's got to, force their employees to get a vaccine if they have more than 100 employees, I think that's probably going to trump this Texas law, and Governor Abbott's probably going to lose in court.
And speaking of vaccine mandates and Biden, Megyn, it was actually when the president was in Illinois when he had this moment that just freaked me out, because I cannot believe this is the leader of the free world. Obviously, the rest of the media are ignoring this because they seem to want to protect Biden, but here's what happened.
The governor, Julius here, Stratton, and I'm from Pennsylvania. The Illinois president Don Harmon, State Senator Laura Murphy, State Rep Martin Moylan, and we got great labor leaders here too. Tim, where's Tim? There you go, Tim. Thank you, pal. AFL-CIO State President, and Jeff Isaacson, United Brotherhood of Carpenters, and Don Finn, IBEW, and Robert Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, Reader.
I mean, Megyn, I'm actually not mocking. I'm not poking fun. I'm genuinely concerned.
All I could do was look at the poor interpreter and think, please, God, let her have a teleprompter in front of her. Please don't make her be relying on what she hears from him in order to sign the messaging. I mean, how challenging would that be? You can't understand him. The meandering, the word searching, the repeated absence of the name when he needs it. And I do think he was working off of a teleprompter. So it's a bit of a mystery what was going on. He can't read now? He doesn't, like, was he trying to ad-lib and falling on his face? I don't know. I'll tell you, my husband, Doug, who's a very measured political analyst, he's not a political analyst, he's a very measured guy, was saying, I feel bad. I feel uncomfortable watching this now. It's like, you just want him to sort of go behind a closed door so that he doesn't have to embarrass himself. It's not like he's a huge Biden fan either. It's our president. We don't want to be looking at this. It makes you feel uncomfortable. Nobody wants to see an elderly person succumb to the natural processes of old age that happen to many of us, but in private. This guy just happens to be the leader of the free world and sadly in charge of a lot of U.S. policy. So it's got an extra layer of
disturbance. And he holds the nuclear codes. I mean, he holds the nuclear codes. And if this were a Republican president, there would be discussions about whether he was fit for the role, and those discussions aren't taking place.
Trump sent out that Kavevi tweet, and we had articles about how he was incompetent for weeks, and he slipped going down a ramp, an icy ramp, and it was like, he's dying, he's no longer got it. I mean, they ignore this, right, because he's their guy, and I think because they also know Kamala Harris is a disaster as a politician and is not the answer to their problems.
No, you're completely right. Well, look, Megyn Kelly, I really recommend folk go and download your Sharon Osbourne interview on the Megyn Kelly Show podcast, because I was gripped.
Thank you.
I was gripped today, loved it, and it's in depth. And also,
wonderful.
You talk a lot about her life away from the controversy and the scandal as well. Megyn Kelly, thank you so much. We'll speak
also
again
unbelievable.
next week.
All right, Dan.
Yes,
see you next week.
Bye-bye. Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.